Electronic calipers. They work nice where it's warm. They'll do funny things. These calipers, when they get cold, they'll readjust themselves by a half thousandths constantly. I mean, you'll go out, you measure something, you get your number, write the number down, and then it'll close the caliper up and you're half thousandths off. Leave it sit for a minute or two. Suddenly it goes back to zero. Half thousandths isn't much, but it's enough when you're trying to do some semi-precision work. For me, valve guides, actually anything, half thousandths makes a difference. I'll give you an example. Chuck Haybrick years ago I was told he ground everything with a thousandths and a half bearing clearance in the International tractor engines. Well, the 414, 436, even a 466, minimum was 2 thousandths. Minimum. I plastic gauge it and it was always coming out at 1.5. Well, if you measure it, yeah, you get 2. So it's kind of a funny thing. They never taught me years before, and even the machine shops wouldn't do it. They put wristband bushings in, hand you the rods back, even on a diesel, old diesel. And the funny part is, I learned after that, is measure the doggone bottom end. Measure the big end. Make sure it's not out of spec. One of the things also that Jim Herman, Jim's Tractor Service in Cherry Valley, New York, if it was within international specifications, he would not have the rod either straightened or the big end honed or even a bushing put in the upper end. If they were within international specs, the new specifications in the data list, he would not do anything with it. Leave it right alone. Why? Because it's a worn surface that's at that. If a bearing spun or something like that, or was loose, or he saw something he didn't like, sure, you're going to have the thing redone. But if you measure the internal hole and it's within that specification, manufacturer spec, he would not touch it. Leave it alone. Because the spec is settled. You go to hone it again, now there's heat in there, there's oil, there's stresses, there's torque and retorque. And he just said, no, just leave it alone. The only thing I recommended to him was to buy a dingleberry hone, work it again, or take a piece of emery and work it so that you had a crosshatch in there. When the bearing shell hit, it had something to grip it. But other than that, it has locks in it to keep it from spinning. But that was one of the things that I came to consideration years ago, that you have to, when you're working with engines and bearings, that half thousandths means something. Caliper, people will say you can't use a caliper and get accurate measurements. You can, but you got to be careful how you use it. Now, if you take this caliper and you measure a piston that's over a couple inches, yeah, you got a problem. You're not going to be able to measure in the area below the ring where some of the engines want to be measured, but most want to be measured down near the bottom of the skirt. Well, then you can take that piston hole and move this thing across the end, not around the piston on the outside, but across the end. So in other words, your piston's there and this thing's at an angle. Oh, it'll still be flat. It'll be on the surface the way it needs to be, and you'll get a good measurement. That's where the half thousandths come in. If you're already padding at a half thousandths, now if you're not perfect and you miss a half thousandths, now you got a full thousandths, you got a problem. So you got to use your head, but calipers work great. I love the things. There's a few times on larger engines, that's what I use, but there are larger old antique tractor engines, and I got a Vernier 12-inch. It worked fine. It really did. How do I know? I use snap gauge in the cylinder bore, and I would slide feeler. I've got feeler gauges too. I have probably 3 or 4 different methods of measuring piston clearance. So, you can howl all you want about it, but there are other ways to do things reasonably and accurately, especially with old antique tractors. In fact, that was one of the things they had a very hard transition in college, was the stuff that we were working on. One of the preferred methods of measuring piston to sleeve clearance or cylinder bore was with a feeler gauge and a pull scale. That's right. If it told you that the range of clearance was such and such a feeler gauge to such and such a feeler gauge, pulling at so many pounds, that gave you an idea that, yeah, some feeler gauges didn't flex. That's right. When they get up there heavier, you start approaching 10 thousandths, they stop flexing much. 15, they even have some of them put a 15 in there and had to pull so hard. But it was within the specification. Now you knew you're okay. Well, that only gets you in one spot. Well, you want to measure the top? Turn the piston over. How hard can it be? Huh? Now you get down through, and if your scale changes, change your feeler gauge. The very simple way. Is it tremendously accurate? No. But the engines we were looking at, they told you, if you followed their specification, how to use the feeler gauge. Yes, it was accurate. Old school. Well, it just wasn't accurate. Say what you want. It worked, and it worked well, and it was simple. Shop guys knew whether they had to put a full kit in a farmer's tractor or not. There were a lot of even wet sleeve engines that they used to take ridge reamers and ream the ridge off the top of the sleeve to overhaul the thing and put it back together. I've done a few engines where I actually got a knurling tool and was able to knurl pistons. I lost it. I don't know where it is now, but knurled a few pistons, set them up, put them back in the car. Did it the old-fashioned way, the way the manufacturer even recommended in certain cases. What does knurling do? Well, take a look at some of the old ratchets where it's got the knurl handle, correct? So in the iron. The same idea on the piston, only not quite that deep. What it does is the pattern is in these rollers. The rollers are pressed against the metal. Now, on the piston, it kind of works like a fork, and you run it across it, and the rollers go back and forth, giving you that pattern. And you run it up and down the piston skirt. And you don't have to do it all the way, just in a little narrow band, probably 1.5 inches wide, 2 inches. That was another thing I learned had to learn later on. But still, you get the knurling in there, and if you did it too tight, it would upset too much metal, and your piston wouldn't fit. Because a common overhaul used to be, and it would last. You had an engine that lasts 100,000 miles, well, we'd knurl them, re-ring them, and put them back in. And if you honed the cylinder to fit better, sometimes they needed it. If your taper and out of round were within the specification, knurl the piston, put on 10 over rings and file them down to fit, put the piston in the bore for the proper piston clearance. Now it doesn't slap around, it doesn't rock, and those piston rings take longer, but they'll wear in. You're golden. Truly golden. It works, and works well. Is it ideal? No. 10,000 pistons being crammed into a bore with taper and out of round, but they do wear together if they're honed properly. What can I tell you? I did it a few times and it turned out very good. Customer didn't want to spend a lot of money. He wanted a weekend driver and an antique car he could enjoy at a parade once in a while. That's it. So I did it 2 or 3 times. Yeah, I had a boring bar and a hone. I knew how to use both and measure the bore to make it work. What can I tell you? So, and I even offered with quite a few of them that $25, $30 a hole. Wait, well, this is 25 years ago. But I could punch the boring bar down through to the size, run a dingleberry hone up and down to clean it up, wash the bore out, double check it, then just assemble it. I had 2 Chevy engines get 150,000 miles on either one of them, and the guy says between oil changes, they never burned even a half quart of oil. Says they burned a half quart the first oil change or two, and then never burned another half quart again after that for 150,000 miles. It was bored in a dingleberry hone run up and down. Brush Research hone. Can I tell you? Did it more than once and it worked very well. But you talk to these guys today, good Lord, you didn't use a sun and hone and scientifically run the data sheet up and down and get the perfect. No. You didn't. But I tried to come up with the same results. I can tell you, it worked. Again, it's not ideal because if you're not careful how you bore it and you're not careful how you run the dingleberry hone doing the cleanup, you can end up with little high ridges of metal here and there, and those rings will seat in hard and you'll lose thousands of miles on the life. Obviously, I didn't. Diesel engines, we put one together one time and the guy says, no, don't hone it. So what do you mean? Don't touch it. We bored it with a Van Norman boring bar. He says you bored the last one on slow and you only got what, 5,000ths? Yeah, leave it alone. Put the engine together. Before it broke in, a 110 horse tractor had 115. Change oil filter, send it home. I don't know. Ran great, started great. David Brown, I think it was a 1690 6-cylinder. Pretty big for David Brown. Well, anyway, what else did I do today that was of note? Not much, because I was still cleaning up and still not feeling all that good. I was looking at how to change some of my cleaning. Basically, with mineral spirits, I actually cleaned something up with rust, and mineral spirits worked phenomenal. You'd have thought I soaked it in some PB Blaster. It's incredible. Cleaned it right up. And then I just took some 3M, kept dipping it in the mineral spirits and cleaning it up. Looks nice. So you learn some different thing every day. I'm going to have to get some more mineral spirits. That stuff's had a few parts through it. Needs filtering or at least a clean out or change. But it's still working well. There hasn't been much that I've been able to do lately other than that. Clean up and move things around. With this ear infection and the coughing from it, I'm still healing. So I was thinking last week, I said, you know what? It feels like I got a minor sinus infection starting up again. I'm going to have to go back to doc next week. It was near Christmas, and I knew I couldn't get in until next week anyway. So just wait till afterward. And, oh no. It's a good thing I didn't make the appointment anyway. And I ended up with running into the walk-in clinic that was open over in Endicott. And then went directly from there to a 24-hour pharmacy over at Wilson in Johnson City. And then immediately took the meds before I even left the building, I think. I had water drink there. Iced tea, or tea anyway. And took it immediately. Whew, hard on the stomach. It's not so bad tonight, but it has been bad days prior to this. I mean, hard. So it'd take hours to finally settle down and then be all right. 1, 2, 3 hours sometimes. So there are times I have to go in there and get a bag of chips and just get something in there. So yeah, I've got antacids, but they don't work much better. It's been a trial this past month, a real trial. The thing I said to Debbie was, I said, of the last 3 Christmases, 2 of them I've been sick. This one here, this year, 2023, and back 2021, the 2 of us were sick with Kabuki. She didn't know it yet, didn't have any symptoms until she came home and said her sinuses and throat started feeling funny after she came home. And I said before that she was fine when she left me. I was a mess. I was putting ice packs in my groin, ice packs in my armpits, on my neck. Then I got everything cooled back down. Once I did, I was feeling pretty good. But but I have some plans and ideas. I have to make some definite changes. But anyway, it's time for me to get back to bed, and my throat's starting in again, so I have to go get some water. You folks have a good night and a Happy New Year.